Right now, joining us is Sam Monson, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast, part of the 33rd team. You can find him on social media at Sam Monson NFL. Sam, wonderful to be chatting with you. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. How are you?
I am fantastic. Really appreciate you taking some time to join us this morning. I know you were out at Packers-Colts joint practice last week, which now in football terms already feels like forever ago, but you did get a live look at the 2025 Green Bay Packers. So just wanted to kind of get some of your takeaways from that joint practice experience.
Yeah, so we drove up to Indianapolis, a couple hours away from where we are located in Cincinnati. Caught the joint practice there. Those are always fun. Like, we try and get to kind of, where we are in the Midwest, we're within shooting distance of a few teams. So if they coordinate or if they time up their joint practices, you can sort of try and get a bunch of teams in a few days. Those are always fun practices to see. I think two things always jump out to me when you're watching those joint practices. Number one, for those of us that aren't in training camp kind of all the time regularly, you do get that first glimpse of guys in the flesh, and there's always one or two guys that jump out and you see the crazy athleticism or the size or the arm strength or whatever it is, the thing that anyway, but it's always interesting having it reinforced in person and seeing just what the difference is between those guys and other people. And then the other thing is just trying to get an idea of the kind of deployment of people. I don't think you can take too much from performances and individual practices, overall production, any of that kind of thing, because it's so day to day. It's so kind of random one day to the next. And, you really need those beat writers that are there every day and can kind of say, look, over 3 weeks of training camp, this has been a general trend. Yesterday, it wasn't, that kind of thing. So I think you get into trouble focusing too much on performances. But I think if you get an idea of sort of how guys are getting deployed and that kind of thing, it's interesting.
So from a Packers standpoint, who was maybe a player or two that kind of stood out to you with either that athleticism or maybe just how they were deployed and how they were utilized?
The most obvious one, I think, is Matthew Golden. Obviously, he's been such an interesting draft prospect even before the Packers selected him. You have this guy whose career was not extensive in terms of the amount of time he was a number one guy or even a significant threat. Before he got to Texas, he was not doing an awful lot at all. Even when he got to Texas, he was arguably the number two receiver in that group before late in the year, he gets the opportunity. He becomes a number one. He takes over and puts up a couple of huge games. And then you have the added kind of confusion of he runs this incredible 40 time, which surprised everybody. Like, nobody saw him running that kind of time. And that just added a whole different layer of, well, is he actually that fast? Why doesn't it look that way on tape? And all those kinds of, that was a really intriguing player. I will say you watch him in the flesh and you can see what they like in him, right? He's obviously quick, fast, smooth is the other thing. And he was just a difficult cover for the Colts DBs the entire game, and not just, young players, rookies. I mean, Charvarius Ward had trouble sticking with him on anything that wasn't a straight go ball. He looks like a guy that's going to have an instant impact and be a really impressive player. And I think also, based off the stuff that I saw, just from a deployment point of view, it was interesting. A couple of years ago, we saw the Packers and a joint practice against the Bengals here. And what was interesting is how much they had designed around Luke Musgrave, because he was such an athlete. They had him in motion constantly. They had all these kind of plays that were drawn up to basically get Luke Musgrave the ball. And obviously, he gets hurt. He hasn't become the player that he was supposed to. And sort of Tucker Kraft becomes the tight end there. But it almost feels like Matthew Golden is now getting those opportunities. Like, he's in motion constantly. He's the guy that's causing problems in the defense. So it feels like Matt LaFleur, every time he has one of those guys, these sort of special athletes, he's trying to build this entire offense around him, or at least use him to make everything else tick.
Yeah, I think that's a huge observation. And yeah, from a Musgrave standpoint, he definitely feels like he's fallen out of favor a little bit. Obviously, Tucker Kraft being as good as he's been takes a piece of that away. But from Matthew Golden's standpoint, one of the things, and you talked about the deployment, is they're using him. They lined him up in almost like that H-back role in one play in preseason. They've been using him out wide. They've been using him deep, intermediate, short. Like he'll do just about everything in this offense. And for a rookie who, again, like you mentioned, didn't become kind of the number one option at Texas until the end of last year, they clearly want to have him involved in the offense in any way possible. They're not holding anything back from him. Now, a lot of the injuries to wide receiver for Green Bay are maybe having a little bit of an effect, but the truth of the matter is they were doing that with him before Wicks and Reed and Dobbs and some of these injuries even existed. Savion Williams, same thing. So yeah, I do think he is going to have a major role in this offense. And yeah, like you said, some of the suddenness, the route running ability, those things have absolutely, stood out. Sam, as well as anybody, one of the real issues for Green Bay last year was drops and just mistakes from the wide receivers. If Matthew Golden, and it's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie wide receiver at any time, but we've certainly seen some first round rookie wide receivers go out and have pretty fantastic years. If he can be that guy that kind of is, whether we want to call it a number one or a go-to or whatever, just in some key situations, come up with some of those big plays and use that smoothness and suddenness to be a big time weapon for Green Bay. How much does this change the Packers offense in your view?
Yeah, I think it's big. And, I don't think it necessarily needs that number one guy, quote unquote, the way you're saying. It just needed somebody to be able to make those plays consistently. And I think you could still make the argument that, a collection of number twos, or for one of a better term, is still fine as long as they're all reliable and they're going to make those plays when the ball comes their way, and they're not going to, spurn the opportunity when they have to make the play. The problem with Green Bay's receiving core, I don't think has necessarily been the absence of a number one. It's been the group of number twos they have not been consistent, and they haven't made those plays all the time when they've needed to. Now, functionally, if Matthew Golden is the guy, it solves both problems either way. So, but it will be interesting if it works out that way, because people will automatically say, well, the problem was they just didn't have this number one guy, and now the number one fixed everything. But I think you're right. Like if Golden shows that he can be a player that can consistently make those plays and be their go-to guy when they need a play, it does change a lot. I mean, that cost Green Bay a lot last season. It cost them in critical situations. And obviously that's paired with Jordan Love needing to, get his best play back together for a stretch, stay healthy. And then I think this is a really high ceiling for an offense as well.
Yeah, I think so. Also, we've got Sam Monson joining us. You can find him on social media at Sam Monson NFL, co-host of Check the Mic podcast, part of the 33rd team. This is an interesting team in Green Bay where for the past 2 years, they've been the youngest team in football. I think they surprised some teams in 2023, especially that big win in Dallas, and then really had San Francisco on the ropes with the ability to win, to go to an NFC championship game. Again, kind of caught a lot of people by surprise. And then, come back last year, they're the youngest team in the NFL again. They win a lot of games, but when they played good teams, they pretty consistently lost, including to Philadelphia in the playoffs in the opening week. And now they're in this interesting situation where there's expectations on them once again to be a good team. They're in a very good conference, a very tough division. And now it's the question of, can they go from, hey, they're a good, fun, young team, to taking that next step and actually being a great football team that wins meaningful games in January and hopefully February. Where do you see their expectations, and how do you see them potentially taking that next step into being a true legitimate contender?
Yeah, I mean, the expectations have to be exactly that, right? Let's build on last year. Let's show that we can compete with the contending teams and not just be one of those strange, also ran teams that are good, not great, and get kind of trapped in that, we can make the playoffs in a given year, but we're probably going one and done. Or as soon as we meet one of the real contending teams, that's when we get bounced. And, they're not the only team that's been in that category. Tampa Bay has been in that group as well. I think they're trying to bridge that gap and get to being the elite category. But that's where Green Bay has been, and that's where obviously they want to get past. And they should. I mean, there's no point in having the youngest team in football for multiple years straight, unless you're tapping into a growth potential that group is then going to surpass other teams because they've grown together and they've developed and they've improved. And, so I think that's what the Packers are working on now is, look, this group is talented. It's young. It's got so much potential, but at some point the rubber needs to meet the road and the potential needs to become reality. Otherwise you just assemble this sort of underachieving group that wasn't able to hang with the best teams in the NFL.
Ian Rappaport yesterday kind of made the argument for saying like a team like Green Bay should be the team that's very interested in a player like Micah Parsons. My guess is, and I think most people's guess is that Parsons still ends up a Dallas Cowboy. You also have Trey Hendrickson. That one is a little bit more intriguing to me. Of does he actually end up a Bengal? Just both of these teams are wild cards, meaning you never know what they're going to do at any given moment. If you're Green Bay, you have this collection of young talent. You're maybe a little bit lacking in superstar talent. You've got future draft picks. You've got salary cap banked up. You know, is this the type of move that if, and it's still a major if a Micah Parsons or a Trey Hendrickson legitimately do become available, and it does seem like Hendrickson actually is, would you be, if you're putting your Brian Gutekunst hat on for a moment, would you be aggressive in trying to make this move if you were Green Bay?
Yeah, I mean, Micah Parsons, I don't think is really an option at all.
Okay.
This is what Dallas do. They posture, they create this story. I don't think it's a thing.
Agreed.
Eventually Micah Parsons is going to sign the richest defensive contract in NFL history, and he's going to be a Dallas Cowboy, and it's going to be the latest in the Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb saga, and that's just the way Jerry Jones does contracts, for better or worse. The Trey Hendrickson one, I think, is more interesting because I think the Bengals would listen to offers. Now, I think it would take a big offer to make it happen because it makes them worse, right? Like there's almost no trade you can put on the table that makes the Bengals a better team this year. Now, future, sure, but they know they're making their chances for 2025 worse by trading this guy away. So it has to be a very bad situation and a trade offer good enough to take. But if you're Green Bay, I would absolutely be making phone calls and finding out, how close are we? How close do we think we could get to this deal that they would take? Because you put Trey Hendrickson on this Packers defense, I think it would make a massive difference. And they already have a guy like Rashawn Gary. So it's potentially a force multiplier in terms of, making his life easier and freeing him up against worse competition. And, as much as Trey Hendrickson is 30 years old and you're the long-term prospect of what he's going to be is a little bit nervy. Last year, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was all-pro caliber last season. Maybe not quite in that, there's a few guys like Myles Garrett who in any given year are defensive player of the year. I don't know if Trey Hendrickson is quite in that category, but he's like one rung of the ladder down. He's a consistent force. He's added to his game. He's gotten better year on year. And he's now one of those legitimate game-changing defensive players that is not just able to get pressure, finish that pressure, but he's able to dial up plays at the key times. And, that it seems like that's sort of it's always difficult to know if that's real, but guys like TJ Watt have been able to do that consistently. Chris Jones, a defensive tackle for the Chiefs, those guys are able to almost summon a play when they need one at will, late in the game in the fourth quarter on a third down when everything hangs in the balance. The last year or two, Trey Hendrickson seems to have added that to his game. So I think that would be a phenomenal addition to the Packers if there was any trade they could give Cincinnati to make it happen.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he would, like you said, be a force multiplier on that defense for the rest of that defensive line and just add a really fun piece for Jeff Hafley after a really impressive defensive performance a year ago. But adding a player like that, I think, gets you into that upper echelon of defenses, or at least gives you the opportunity to be that. We're being joined by Sam Monson. You can find him on social media at Sam Monson NFL, co-host of the Check the Mic podcast. If you're not checking that out and downloading that every single time it is out, you are absolutely missing out. All right, Sam, before we get you out of here, you obviously keep an unbelievable tab on the entirety of the NFL. I want to ask you about where you see kind of things stacking up in the NFC North. My opinion, it's one of the more fun divisions in football. You've got Detroit, and wanting to see if they ultimately make that run to the Super Bowl, or if this has just ended up in a really fun regular season team that never is able to quite get over the hump. And of course, losing Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn is a piece of that as well. Green Bay, we've talked about, and then Minnesota, it's the JJ McCarthy era. Chicago, you get the Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams stuff. So it's a very intriguing division. How do you kind of see this stacking up?
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting division, and it could be a great division depending on, how the teams with question marks pan out. I think we know that Detroit is going to be very good. The only concern really is you lost both coordinators in an offseason. I think they're pretty well insulated from that, the way they do things. Dan Campbell having set the agenda, the tone, the culture there, and promoting from within. The offensive line is a little bit creakier than it's been the last few years as well. That could potentially be an issue. But generally, I think Detroit are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL again. We talked about Green Bay already. They should be very good. The question is, can they become great? So that's two good teams in the division. Minnesota have done incredible work to build around JJ McCarthy. The question is just, what is he going to be? If he's good, if he looks like the rest of that quarterback class from a year ago, the Vikings could well be incredibly good again. And then you've got Chicago and what Ben Johnson's doing there, and how quickly can that come together? You have to basically try and get Caleb Williams back on the rails after his rookie season, where he didn't seem to get coached the right way, and he sort of played into his bad habits. How quickly can Ben Johnson put all that together and get the Bears moving in the right direction? They feel like a team that might be definitely moving in the right direction, but it might take a bit to kind of jump to where the other teams are. So I think you're probably going to end up with two very good teams, one that could be very good, and then the Bears, who are going to be better than they were a year ago, but maybe not quite at the same pitch as the other three.
I think all four of those teams are going to be a pain to play for any opponent as well. And any team that has the NFC North on their schedule is probably not going to be super excited about it. And like you said, if those quarterbacks hit and some of those, question marks go away, yeah, it could be a real crazy division that is really up for grabs over the course of the next multiple seasons. Sam, I cannot thank you enough for taking some time. Tell us all about the Check the Mic podcast and everything that you're doing over there.
Yeah, check the mic anywhere you get your podcasts or on YouTube. We're in our new studio now in downtown Cincinnati. We built this whole thing. We created we had basically a blank canvas, a big concrete box, and we created our little set in there. So it's we're pretty excited about it this season. We're almost into the 3 shows a week territory and kicking off the season for real.
It is not an easy task to keep track of 32 NFL teams and everything that's going on, not to mention all the draft prospects and the stuff that you guys do during the draft. You both do incredible work. It's must listen to every single time. I enjoyed every single time. I appreciate you taking a couple moments with us, and hopefully we can do it again in the near future.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Again, go follow him on social media at Sam Monson NFL. A huge thank you for him joining us on the Fan Guest Hotline, powered by Gruber Law. One call. That's all. This is the Pack-A-Day Radio Show. We'll be right back with more right after this.